Okay, we are in the fourth year. We are in the fourth year of Pesach, and we're in the middle of Siman Kuf Ches. We're up to Sif Dalid. Okay, so Sif Dalid of Siman Kuf Ches, and we're in the middle of discussing the flour and the grains that are used for Pesach. So let's move along. Sack. What happens when you have the sacks that you're schlepping everything with? So they're filled with kemach, and it's lachlech mimayim. And now they got sacks. Like, you put a sack on your back. That's how they carry the book. It's how they carry big stuff. You want to buy a 50-pound bag of whatever, it's a sack, flour. So you have the sacks that they were transporting the flour, and it gets wet. So what do you do now? So if it got wet in one particular place, it could still be wet. Or even if it dried, but it's in one place. You see the stain, you know where it got wet. So, or you see a cup of something spilled on it. So, what you do is you grab the place where the water fell with your hand. So you're holding the flour, and then you basically cut the bottom or something like that. The yorek hashar, and the rest of it will pour out. Umutter, and it's mutter. Now the Alter Rebbe adds the toiv l'rakte achakak. You should still sift it after this. So in other words, at rag zeshen islach lach aser, in this situation, the little piece that became the area that became wet, that one is going to be a problem. Now, why is this? Because so over here, basically, it's not enough, like we said before, to be mavatlin or whatever, because here we know for sure water fell on flour. So the only thing you can do is not have it mixed. Now, if you open up the sack, forget it. You're not going to be able to find it. Especially if it dried, it becomes soft again. It becomes piecey again. It's not clumped together. So how are you going to know what became chametz? So if you know where the water fell, grab it with your hand, let the rest of it spill out into another bag or whatever it is, and then whatever you're holding through the sack, you know that that's the part that was the issue, and then you take that away. You throw it away. 1 second. But what would happen if it got wet in a few places? So let's say it spritzed on it in a bunch of areas. So now, you can't hold it. How are you going to hold 15 spots? So what do you do now? So then, like this. If it's still wet. Now, when it's wet, it clumps together. So if it's still wet, you sift the flour, and whatever is left in the sifter, perurin as clumps, you know that is chametz. Vashar, the rest of it is mutter. Why is the rest of it mutter? Because the rest of it never got wet. It's a softer thing, and therefore you know that it never got wet. So when it gets wet in a bunch of places, you don't have that option anymore. So you know that while it's wet, it's clumpy parts. And therefore, if you strain it or sift it rather, and the clumps stay on top, that's the chametz. The rest of it is fine. Now here they add from the Alter Rebbe, afilu hu b'toicha Pesach. You're even allowed to do this in the middle of Pesach itself. Now, this would have to be a situation where it's for Yom Tif, you need it. So again, we don't use flour anymore on Yom Tif, we don't bake on Yom Tif anymore. But for those that would have used flour on Yom Tif, we don't bake with flour, I'm saying, but for those that would bake with flour on Yom Tif, so if they need it, so then the Alter Rebbe explains like this. Usually you're not allowed to sift things that you could have done before Yom Tif, right? Sifting is a malacha that you don't have to do now. Sifting is a malacha you don't have to do now. Certain things, they're better now. You bake fresher, it's better now. Sifting you could have done before. So in theory, it's also to do it on Yom Tif, right? You're only allowed to do things that you couldn't do before, that wouldn't last as long or stuff like that. Here, the sifting could have been before. What? Done. So the thing is like this: you're not allowed to sift on Yom Tif, but this situation, these were sifted before Yom Tif, and they're usable. The reason why in this situation it became a problem is because it got wet somewhere on Yom Tif itself, and now you want to be able to figure out how to use it. So in this case, it was already sifted; it's already usable. The only reason why you're sifting it is because part of it you want to be able to use for Yom Tif. In that case, according to the Alter Rebbe, you're allowed to do it. He does say you should do it through a goy. That would be the best way to do it. Even though it was sifted once before, better to use someone else than to do it yourself. And you're doing it, let's say, mitzvah. We learned this that if it's a amira la'akum, which means a shvus to shvus, right? Amir al-Akam is one Shavuos, is one Dirabana. And you already sifted it before Yom Tif, so it's a second Dirabana. And you're doing it for a mitzvah, baking it for your needs on Yom Tif. Again, in those days when they would bake matzah on Yom Tif, so then you can do it in that situation. Same thing would be if the animals, the rodents, ate from it on Yom Tif. Yiraktenu, the same thing here. You should also sift it as well, even though, as you mentioned before, there's a suffix if the achbar would make it into chametz anyways, but you should sift it. But you should treat it the same exact way. That you should hold it, if it was in one area, you should hold it and let the rest spill out. If it's a bunch of places, then you should sift the whole thing while it's wet. What happens if it dries? So this is a situation where you have a sack and it gets wet in a bunch of places. And you come the next day and you say, oh no, I see the drops of water, I see the leak, but it's dry now. So once it's dry, you can't sift it anymore because now it became soft pieces again. So in this case, the whole thing would become asr. In this situation, you would not be able to use this. Okay, yeah? That's what comes out from there. Now, how relevant is it to us? It's not practically relevant because we don't, like I said, we don't really do this, but it shows us the process and the importance or the severity that we treat this whole thing. So it's a good thing to go through. Fine, sif hey. Now these are some interesting halachas. B'yoyim shetachanu as a kemach. The day that they grind the wheat and they turn it into flour, asur la'afaisa, you're not allowed to use the wheat that day. Why not? The wheat becomes hot. Yeah, you ever turn on a blender? You want to make you take coffee beans and you want to turn it into coffee. You leave it in the blender for a few seconds too long and it comes warm. Yeah, the machine makes it warm. So the fact that it's spinning around will makes it warm. So here you grind it, and if you continue, that itself changes the temperature slightly. And therefore, what's the difference? The problem is that when you eventually will mix it with water, the fermentation process, the chimutz process, which usually takes 18 minutes, might take a lot quicker. So therefore, we don't know how long that quicker is. So therefore, what should you do? At minimum, or at best, I should say rather, at best, you should wait. Well, it's not really at best. Let's see. So case number one would be to wait 24 hours. From when you grind it into flour, you should wait 24 hours. Now, the Alter Rebbe writes, so really you should wait 2 days. And if you can't do 2 days, then you do 1 day, 24 hours. If you can't do that, at least overnight. At least overnight. Now, the Rebbe Rashab, when, like I mentioned, when they were collecting the wheat and everything to make it into the thing, so he would do it specifically. He had a very specific thing of when it wasn't too hot, wasn't too cold between the hours of 12 and 12:30. So a lot of these things were for these similar reasons. That wasn't tachanu, that wasn't grinding it, but still it was this type of stuff that we'll see later, a little bit similar to Mayim Shalanu. Now, what happens if you didn't? Yes, the Alter Rebbe writes, what happens if you didn't? You grind it in the morning and you have no choice. It's Erev Pesach, let's say. So in that case, you could still do it. The whole shash is that it's going to happen quick. That's the whole shash. So if you make it super fast and you're moving it with your hands the whole time, then it could still be kosher. So there's, I guess you could say four levels, right? Best way is to wait 2 days. You can't do that, wait 24 hours. You can't do that, wait overnight. From when you grind it till you use it. If you can't even do that, then with the Evan, you could do it, just do it very quick. So again, for us, it's not so relevant. They always take care of these things in the matzah bakery. Even for those who bake on their own, you're not the one who actually grinds the flour. They do that for you. But that should be done before. Fine. And like I mentioned also, there were those that didn't like using the electric ones because they said that the electric grinders, they go too quickly, it makes it even hot. So when they first came out, I think the Rebbe Rashab, maybe whoever it was against using it. I think he also didn't want them to use, maybe when they came out with metal ones, he didn't like that they were using metal ones. So there are different things about exactly how to, what was the best way to do it. What? They probably did in the early 1900s. It's possible. Why not? Yeah. So I don't know. It could be it was by the Frierdiker Rebbe. It could be it was by the Frierdiker Rebbe more about the grinding. It could be by the Rebbe Rashab. It was the metal. They introduced, instead of the wood ones, they came with metal ones. I don't know, whatever. There was something changed and he wasn't happy about it. Okay. Sif Vav. I think you're right. By the Rebbe Rashab, they actually used a water mill. I think by the time it came to the Frierdiker Rebbe, that's when they came out with the electric ones. Okay, Vav. Hasakim she'samim behem hasakema. These sacks that you're going to put flour into, Tov la'aseisu chadashin, the best thing is to have new ones special for Pesach. And this is from the Alter Rebbe, he says, the mitzvah min hamufkar, this would be the best way to do it. L'misha avshalei, if it's possible. So in other words, it's not like a hard requirement, but it's something that would be a good thing. Or at least, if you can't do that, then at minimum you should undo all of the stitching, kulan, the whole thing, and you should wash it with hot water, which is soap basically, and with like rubbing it, scrubbing it, vechavito, which is basically hitting it. It's the process of how they clean in the olden days, where they take something to the water and they wring it and they bang it and they move it and all that stuff. Now, 1 second. Now, even if the Alter Rebbe says, even if you didn't undo it, the stitching, it could still work. So again, this is about the sacks that they transported the flour, but I'm going to extend this to another thing also, which is basically tablecloths. People like to sometimes use the same tablecloths for Pesach. So sometimes you have fancy, different ones, but if you don't, you could use them. You have to wash them with much hotter water than usual. So on your setting in your washing machine, you put on the hottest setting, and you make sure there's nothing stuck underneath. You take a look underneath the seams and just make sure there's nothing there. But our machines are pretty good with knocking them and banging them and wringing them, the whole process. So usually you won't have any issues. So, but that's what you should do. You turn it up to like a, longer, hotter cleaning cycle, and that's how and then it wouldn't be a problem. So even though here it's talking about the sacks that they would use to transport, which the Rebbe Rashab in his letters would write, requesting that they be new and whatever, but b'diavad, if not, as long as you follow these things, then it can do it, and that's how we would do it with our tablecloths and stuff like that. Fine. Zayin asur laniach sak im kemach agabe behema ela im yesh of tachtav. He says you should not put the sacks that have the flour on top of an animal unless there's something separating them, like a saddle or some other piece of leather or something. The im loy kain, because if not, yischamim. Number one, it's going to get hot from the animal, and if it gets hot from the animal, that could, like we said before, speed up the process of and also the another thing also is it could become wet from the sweat of the animal. Now hold this thought, we'll come to the end and I'll tell you, because someone mentioned something about people sweating while they do it, so let's get to that in a second. But here it's talking about the animal. The animal, he says, is that you should put something in between because you don't want it to get hot from the animal. Now when you're transporting in a truck and they bring it from one place to the other, you have the same issue. You don't want it that it should be getting too hot, aside from the truck, aside from the sun baking on it, so it has to be controlled in some way. He says that it's also, you should be careful not to pile them too high, because the pressure, the pressure, the weight makes energy, and that energy is heat, and therefore you have the same issue of yachmitz balisha. I have seen some modern or contemporary place can say that nowadays this doesn't happen. I don't know if it ever did, but the weight of it doesn't cause it to get hotter, so I don't know how it would apply today. They definitely pile them up some, but whenever I used to pass by the matzah bakery in Crown Heights and I would see the truck, it never looked very full. It was very like 1 or 2 layers or 3 layers of the sacks. Now I don't know if they always did that or if it was just when I came by they were finished unloading it, but I noticed it a few times, so it could be that they don't load it up too much. But what if a person did? You put it on the animal or you loaded it up too much. So again, it's not a problem. No one says it becomes chametz. That's not our issue. Our issue is that it might become chametz quicker, and therefore, if you went and you put it on the animal, in these situations, you should just wait extra time until you use it. So, because again, the issue was that it might happen too quickly. So you should just keep it for an extra day or two until it's ready, and then you could use it in that way. Now, the reason why is the sweat of the animal? Why is it only l'chatchila, right? If you did it, we're saying it's not a problem. Why not? So he says because the sweat of a person, it's actually brought the different list of things that could become chametz. There's certain things. Like let's say it says the stuff that come out of your eye could, your spittle maybe possibly could, but the sweat of a person, it says, does not cause chametz. The Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch. So the shaila is if the sweat of an animal is like that, or if it's like something else, which is why lechatchila, if you could, we try to take care of these things. So b'diavad, it will be okay. But the sweat of a person is not an issue. I mean, health-wise, it might be more of an issue. But mitzad the halacha of it becoming chametz, that it doesn't do. Okay, so let's move on to Siman Kuf Tes. Now here, similar halachas, we'll do this siman, and then we'll jump over to Dikas Chametz and Seder stuff, and then we'll see if we have time, then we'll come back later. But for now, we'll just do that. What? Yeah, dinamayim. So this is the water. So this last siman was about the flour that you're going to use, how you get it. We didn't talk about what type, but there is a whole conversation of what type of flour you can use. But there is a preference, it sounds like, to use maybe whole wheat, or somewhat whole wheat. So even the matzah bakery, let's say in Crown Heights, they sell whole wheat. And then the regular one is also whole wheat. There's some whole wheat mixed in, just not to the same ratio. But there's some people prefer it, some people don't, whatever. Either way, what? Oh, so dinamayim is when you make matzah, there's two ingredients, flour and water. So where does the water come from? What type of water are you using? From the sink? So let's see. There's a lot of halachas about it. So ein loshin as hamatzis el b'mayim tzoinanim. Though when you make the matzah, you should use cold water. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. Cold water. What does it mean? Cold water? Shalanu halayla. That they stayed overnight. So it's called mayim shalanu. Anyone ever heard mayim shalanu? So it doesn't mean our water shalanu. It means shalanu that stayed overnight. Now, why do we do this? Basically, colder water, you're safer. In other words, the warmer the water, the faster the chimutz could happen. So you want it to be colder. So therefore, it's an extra sort of chumrah or an extra hider, thank you, in place to save us that even if we're not going to work as fast as we should, but the fact that it's cold will help us. Okay. Now, what does it mean? What does it mean cold and hot? So he says like this, the Hainu, sheyishiv oisam bein hashmashis, you should draw the water from after shkia on a night, the yamdu b'tolush kol halayla, and it shouldn't be in the ground for the whole night. Okay, so in other words, the night before you use it, you take it out of the ground and you have it in a keli, whatever it is that you're doing, and this way it's not in the ground. There's something about being in the ground that makes it warm. Now, what that means, I can't tell you exactly, but I could tell you that the way it's described in Shulchan Aruch is there's two opinions. Either they say that when the sun during the day goes over, it heats it up from on top, and others say that when the sun goes on bottom, whatever that means, during the night, it heats it up on the ground. They say, look, in the morning, you see the water as mist coming out of it. So I don't know what it means warm. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means from the sun. The water is cold when you take it out. I used to do my Shalom at Crown Heights. It was freezing. There was ice everywhere. So I don't know what it means. But this is what the halacha says. And therefore, what we do is we take it bein hashmashis. Bein hashmashis is literally between the suns. It's when the sun is neither here nor there. And this way, the sun is it's not taken out during the day, and it could have a proper zman that it needs outside of the ground to cool off. Okay, so that's the theory behind it. Now, what would happen if the night is longer than 12 hours? So let's say you draw the water. Let's just say 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. Yeah, it depends if you change the clock. Let's say 5 p.m. You draw the water 5 p.m. It only gets light at 7 o'clock, let's just say. And you wake up early, you want to start baking at 5 o'clock or 4:30. So, or something like that. So it's 12 hours, but it's still night. The sun hasn't come up yet. So the halacha in this case would be asur lalosh ben ad arayim. You have to wait, according to the best way to do this, is you really need to wait until the sun comes back up. In other words, the point is it needs to be out of the water, out of the ground, I'm sorry, for number one, 12 hours, and number two, also the whole duration of the sun being under the ground. So you have to do either one. The imalayla katzur, what happens if the night is shorter? Let's say you're doing it in the winter, right? They start baking Hanukkah time. So let's say it's a little bit after. Let's say after Hanukkah, but let's say it's beginning of Adar or something like that, where the night is, let's say 11 and a half hours. And you don't have 12 hours of night. You only have 10 hours of night, 11 hours of night. So what do you do then? If you start baking early in the morning, the sun will be out again, but it won't have passed 12 hours of the water being out of the ground. So then, you should wait at least 12 hours. So you have both things. Number one, you should wait at least 12 hours. And number two, you should wait for the full cycle of the night, if it's longer or shorter, either way. Or not either way, but yeah, so even if the sun comes out, you should still wait a bit. Now, what's the meaning that people do? I guess I shouldn't say meaning. What's the behavior that people do? As soon as it becomes light outside, they use the water they drew the night before, and they're already baking. But it wasn't 12 hours. So now technically they have what to rely on, so it's not the worst thing. Most don't like this. And therefore, so therefore you should be careful. So here the Kitzur says there's two things. You should draw the water during Bin Hashmashis so that the sun is in neither place, then it should stay overnight, number one, and 12 hours minimum, number two. Both of those together, and then you could use it. And we'll see later of how to store it and everything like that. But that's one of the things that come up from this. Okay, we'll see tomorrow, Mr. Hashem.
Rabbi, I want to say that.